Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Jim Miller and Terrence Moore. The Flip Side starts right now. Welcome to the show. Gentlemen, we are getting back to our election coverage for this 2022 season. Let's pick up today with the delegate race for 2B. In that race, we have the incumbent, Dr. Delegate Brenda Cham. She is being opposed by Thomas Stoltz on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, we have Laditra Robinson, and we have Brooke Grossman. Let's start with the incumbent. Jim, what say you?
Yeah, you know, I don't, I've not necessarily seen anything from Dr. Cham that screams to me, oh man, I got to vote for her. But I've also not seen anything that screams to me, oh man, I can't vote for her, right? So she, as most of our viewers hopefully know, was an appointed delegate to fill a seat that was vacated when Paul Quarterman, I believe, was moved to Senate. And you know, I've seen some of the things that she's voted for, and they largely align with where I would like to see her vote. So, yeah, I guess my only criticism is I'm not sure that if I were in her position running for the first time, that I wouldn't have gotten more out than what I've seen her get out. She does have a Facebook page, and there's issues on it. I've seen some other advertisements, but I don't see her talking a lot about issues, or as much as I'd like to see. Just my opinion.
Now, I'm not the marketing guy, but I hang out with one.
Funny.
It's kind of like sleeping at a Holiday Inn. And something that I've learned in regards to spending time with Terrence over the years, when you're a candidate, when you're the incumbent, there's a lot that you can be attacked on because you have a record or a lack thereof. And when you're running and you don't, you can just be aspirational and you can say a lot of stuff, right?
Yep.
I think the thing is that Brenda has left a trail of things that she can be attacked on in the most purple district in the county. Terrence, what say you to that?
I agree, 100%. I think that she came into position running as city council. Remember, she was running for city council at the time that she was pulled out of that race and appointed to delegate. She came into position at a influx time that we were looking at, you know, just across the state, you know, everything with COVID, with social justice, police reform. There was some big votes that came across her desk at that time, and I rarely seen her beat the table for something that she was passionate about. I think it was a pull between people assuming she was towing the line of the party, or whether she was just trying to get herself acclimated at that time, because as beneficial as it may be to be appointed into these positions, there's also a disadvantage of trying to build relationships and pick up, you know, on the work that's already been initiated by her predecessor, and especially in this case when hers is trying to do the same thing at a Senate position. So it was probably difficult for Senator Quarterman to kind of bring her along and usher her along as he was stepping into a seat of former Senator Serafini, who had stepped away from politics and still could probably mentor him a little bit. So I believe she was kind of caught up in the wind. And Jim, I agree, because of that, there was nothing really that you can grasp and hold on to, like, this is who she is and this is who she stands for. So when you have gaps in understanding, people fill it in, and usually they fill those gaps in with perception.
What other people are saying.
And what other people are saying.
And with the talking points, and in a largely purple district, as you rightly point out, that 50% of the vote is in the Republican Party. And I think that, you know, 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 I that fill-in could be negative.
Yes.
And the thing is, you know, her first year in office, right? She comes in, when she came in, the biggest thing that Quarterman was working on was the stadium, right? So there wasn't any time for him to slow down to catch her up to speed. He had to be full speed ahead,
Right.
because he was against the time clock of getting that thing done. So there wasn't much on her plate, right? She wasn't prepared to be in that position, so there wasn't much for her to work on in year one.
Well, and I wouldn't call that not prepared. I would call that a situational issue, because the major initiative was being handled by others, and
Right.
there was nothing she could do to change that. That was out
But
of her
what
control.
I'm saying is that now, in running, she can have initiatives of her own.
Exactly.
To
and
move
that's
forward.
what I fail to see. If you
But
look at
when you're moved up like that, unbeknownst to you until the final hour, right? You're scrambling. You're trying to find staff and figure out your living arrangements. I mean,
Right.
you know, she gave up her job. Like, there was a lot of moving pieces there. And the biggest news that we heard about Brenda once she became in office, that number one, she was the first African American GOP, right?
Right.
They celebrated that, and then there was a dust up where the young lady that was associated with Councilwoman Burnett's campaign made some racial statements, and I think that did her a disservice, because the Republican Central Committee jumped all over that and made it more than what it was, right? And then went on in February to celebrate Black History one day of the month. I just think that they used it for their purposes, but it did not do her any favors.
So if you look at her Facebook page, the last several posts, we have a notice that election judges are needed. We have a nonprofit, a couple of pictures from a nonprofit. We have a notice to avoid a certain area in Washington County because of an accident that happened at the time. And we have one post about a ribbon cutting at a business that was opening. And then we have a Juneteenth celebration, our Hagerstown Juneteenth celebration. We have the flyer for that. Okay, that doesn't tell me much.
I don't believe there's much of a campaign team there. From the outside looking in, I don't know how much support the Central Committee is giving her at this
Yeah.
time.
The problem is, you know, I see that, to your point about it being the most purple district in the county, I see that position being at risk, and I think she's got to be more aggressive or more communicative, is probably a better word, than maybe even her competitors, based on the fact that she was appointed, and this is her first go round. I'm not seeing the level of effort.
And I'm
Just
sorry.
my opinion.
And I'm sorry. And it shouldn't have to do anything with politics. She's a black woman, and she's a Republican.
Yeah.
That's a hurdle to overcome. And I know she's been questioned about that, even in communities that she's
serves,
present.
right.
She's been present. I'll give her that. She's been present. She tries to be present. She's at businesses. As far as being welcomed and a community throwing their arms around her, or a group throwing their arms around her in support, that's what I don't truly see enough of. Because I know she's out there, but I don't see anyone beating the table in support of her as well. I think a lot of people know of her, but I think there's a separation between, because of those assumptions, right? You know, her political party, her race, her gender should not really come into factor if you're putting out there what you stand for, if you're showing your plan. And if you don't put that stuff out there, people go to their biases.
Right.
And I think that's where some of her obstacles going to be right now. People assuming some of those biases because of who she is, and also some of the places she has been present at. You know, she's been at Trump rallies, right? And I think those are some of those things that people, if you don't have a conversation with an individual, all you can do is make the assumptions of what that means and who that person truly is. So I believe in this case, even though she's sitting in the seat, she probably needs to run as if no one knows her. Because
Well,
I think
that's exactly my point.
Yes, because I think people are confused at who she truly is.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that, you know, there's some things that are questionable, right? There's some times that she was towing the party line. And my question is that true belief, or this is kind of the delegation's decision in regards to how you move. For instance, why would she go to that meeting in West Virginia when they were talking about leaving the state, right? Why would you even be there?
Well, I
That's
can tell
not
you,
the
I wouldn't be
views.
there. I wouldn't be there, but she's not the only one that can have that one hung around their neck.
But her position is different from any of the others. Everyone else is in the county. She's in the city. That's that in your purple district. That is not the leanings of who you're representing. You can't convince me of that in a million years.
Okay.
Right.
That's
so
a fair point.
why do you go to that? And why are you leaning in so heavily on some of these hard right controversial issues? Like, do your delegation, does the Republican Central Committee even care about you? Because to have you standing out there going after these issues that aren't going to get the positive attention from the voters that you need to get reelected, like, these are things that can be hung around you. And I just don't think it made sense.
I think that comes from trying to build relationships, right? It's like, little example, like it's like being a new kid at school, right?
Wow.
The group that accepts you, invites you to the party, you show up and you realize maybe I shouldn't be at this party.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because so first of all, let me state that one of the things I think she does have going for her, not because she has the doctoral degree, but because I sat here on this set and talked to her when she first started. She's a very bright woman.
Absolutely.
Extraordinarily bright.
Mm-hmm.
I think I credit some of those perhaps mishaps, and again, it depends on your view there, but specifically the Follow Me to West Virginia piece, on just newness and, attaching your horse, at least temporarily, to maybe the wrong cart.
Well, that's why I blame the party for these things, right? Because she had a short amount of time to prove herself before she had to run on her own. Already with a city electorate that's a little upset with the farm system that the Republicans have created for themselves, right? So with that short amount of time, these were things that you could just look at and you know what? That's not the core of who I serve. Like, I should sit this out.
But she also come in at a party that was seeing a little fracture at that time as well.
True.
Right? So who
Well,
do
yeah.
I follow?
Right.
Who do I follow? And I think when I say there's Trump rallies, I'm not saying that she was out there, but she would show up to things that the Republican Party would show up to, and I think again she was going along with those parties.
Right.
She was going, and I'm not saying, but we don't know her ideals, right? I think she needs to get it out there. I've always said, and Delegate Cham, I know her personally. I love her spirit personally. She's a great person, highly intelligent. I think she struggled with navigating the social environments around the parties, around leaders and people who she associated with and who she can align with. But I always think she missed the boat on education.
Right, that's her strong suit.
This is her strong suit. Like I don't think there's any person right now, elected official at any level locally, who can hold a candle to her background and her understanding of education, especially in the state it is in. And I believe her educational background is in special education.
Yes.
Right? So this is who she is. We're having a new superintendent coming in. We have Board of Education, elections going on. We've seen our schools pretty much, try to hold itself together with Band-Aids post-pandemic. Like, this is where she could have really dug in and put some focus on education. So I think that's where she needs to campaign on her strengths.
And here's the thing that I will give to Brenda. We've talked about the rooms that she did. Let's be honest. Brenda will show up everywhere. She will support everyone. And the thing that I give Brenda the credit for, she shows up for people that hate her guts, that have disparaged her and talked about her on social media like no other. She still showed up at their events.
Yep.
Like she has that humble spirit about her. And there is something to be said about that type of character in a person that can show that type of forgiveness and will show up for the good of community, even if you know that as soon as you walk out of the room, the people that invited you there are going to attack you. So that there is something to be said for that. I just don't think the party has done her any favors at this point, and I'm not sure where the support is for her campaign from them right now.
Who else is on there? Who else is?
We have Thomas Stoltz that's running I have not. Jim, have you? I'm coming to you. Have you seen anything about this candidate whatsoever, other than in March he declared that he would run?
He declared on March 16th, 2022. No, I have not. He doesn't list a web page. He doesn't list a Facebook page. He doesn't list a Twitter account.
So he's there in name only.
Yeah, he is a Republican.
So he's a protest.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what he is. I'd like to know what he is, because, you know, there's the possibility that he could be somebody really smart that we'd all get behind, but I don't know that at this point.
And the Martinsburg area, Morgansville, sorry, not Martinsburg, the Morgansville area, was that part of that area kind of carved out of the district with the redistricting?
I'm not absolutely sure.
I'm not sure either.
Because I remember us speaking about some of that movement. And
With Barry Jackson.
With Barry Jackson, and I'm looking at his address. This is where his address falls, I believe, right in this area. So I'm not sure if we haven't heard more, because he may not be able to anymore either. Again, I'm just kind of speculating, because we haven't heard anything. This goes back to filling in the gaps, right?
We would have at least heard something, because the ballots need to be taken care of. So we would have at least heard if he was being struck from the ballot.
Again, I don't know if he just hasn't decided to move forward, you know, because you had to kind of contest it to be struck from the ballot, right? And, you know, so I don't know. I'm trying to wonder why you wouldn't hear anything coming into the primaries, and we're only weeks away.
Yes, we are. There is a Facebook entry that has a Maryland flag that has a gentleman named Thomas Stoles, and given the political posts that are on there, it may be Mr. Stoles, but there's no notion that I've seen, and again, I haven't looked the whole way through this post, but in the first several posts, I don't see anything that suggests he's running for anything.
Yeah, I couldn't understand when you know you had Delegate Cham already from your party in the seat, and there was no one else running from your party against her. You would have had to put your name in there because you felt that you were more qualified than she was, right?
Exactly.
So I just
prove that.
Right? I don't see anything from you, but we've seen this on the county commissioner side. A lot of people throw their names out there.
Well,
on the list.
maybe that's why Delegate Cham. Maybe this is not. Maybe this is a plan for Delegate Cham, that she knows there's not much competition there, and she thinks that name recognition will get her through the primaries, and then she can start the battle.
Well, I don't think that. I mean, at this point, we are just over a month away from primaries. I don't think there's much of a shot here from someone that's unknown, we don't even know about, sitting here today.
And that's why I think Delegate Cham can actually kind of coast here, right? She can only hurt herself, right, at this point in time, right? Especially against nothing outside of just the name.
Right.
And she's going to get through the primaries because of that. And it also becomes a numbers game, right? And dollars and cents. Why put a lot of money and effort into a race that you know you're going to win, and then have to do it again for the generals? And people, unfortunately, just remember the last big bang that you push forward for them to stick in their mind when they go into the ballots.
And I know she has a fundraiser coming up, you know, and she has some Republicans from around the state that I know that Senator Quarterman's showing up for her, and Kelly Schultz and some others. So she has some folks that are showing up to help her fundraise, to move her campaign along. But we shall see. Now let's get to the Democratic side, gentlemen. On the Democratic side, we have
Brooke Grossman,
and we also have
Laditra Robinson.
Now let me say this. Of all the races in the county, 2B, in my opinion, is the only one that Democrats have a chance to get a seat. The only one.
Okay.
Okay. But with that said, let's look at these two candidates. So in 2020, Brooke Grossman ran for city council, and Laditra Robinson ran for school board. Brooke Grossman was 7th running for city council, and she barely beat Dr. Cham, who a month before the election had been announced that she was going to be the delegate. So the vote count, when I look at that, was 4,293 for Grossman, and we had 3,772 for Brenda. So Brenda was, very close to her, within a point of her, with not even being on the ballot.
Right.
And then the other race, Laditra Robinson ran for school board, and she was the lowest vote getter other than write-in votes. She only received 15,000 votes, or 9% of the votes, when she needed at least 14% to obtain a seat. So,
and she recently got appointed to the Central Committee as
the
well.
Democratic Central Committee, that was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So you guys take this one where you want to go. Jim, you can.
Yeah, there's information out there. A lot of what I see on her Facebook page, which I think is her major source of information at this point. There's a lot of, hey, I'm running, hey, I'm running, hey, I'm running. But again, I don't see a lot of meat.
I don't think you're going to get meat from anyone. I do see her campaign. If you go to Laditra Robinson, her campaign is completely different than it was when she ran for the school board.
School board, she really didn't have a campaign.
Right.
This campaign has the fingerprints of her son all over it, who has the political chops in the family, in my opinion.
Absolutely. You see the videos. She's doing the door knocking. She's trying to make herself known as a presence. She has, again, my thing with her is her focus should be on the youth, right? Because that's where her expertise is. Because she has somewhat of a finishing school, an etiquette school that she runs for young women, and that with national appeal that she's worked on that for a number of years as well. So she's doing the work as far as being seen, but I don't think she's being seen by the entirety, right? Everyone in the city, right? I think, and I hate to, the Democratic vote seems to always go on a door knock on the minorities. They believe for some reason it feels like if you get the minorities, you'll win, which doesn't make sense to me because the word minority means you are the minority, right? Right? So you're not.
In our community, even more when it comes to voting.
Even more when it comes to voting. So it just seems, and there's some pandering at times that I feel, and not to kind of pigeonhole in either one of them, just kind of a democratic, that you just want to be minority friendly, right? With no plan or goals or processes or, like, tell us what you're going to do. It's great to be recognized. It's great to be seen, right? That's great. But how are you going to include the minority population and constituents into this huge boom of economic development that's happening in this region?
Yeah.
Talk to me. Say something to me, right? Explain that to me. Just don't tell me I'm for you. Right, that's great. It's great to have somebody on my side, but I need somebody on my side that's going to get me somewhere. Right. And I'm not hearing that or seeing that.
Yeah, I know Laditra, she does some financial literacy courses, so her community service is robust.
Yes.
She also she's married a prominent black family within our community. She's a Robinson, which is descendants of Walter Harmon and the Harmon Hotel. So she has, that connection in regards to community. But I believe it's limited. I believe that connection is limited. I know that she has been hosting events, and she's been hosting ice cream socials, and she's been having like meet and greets in different parks.
She's got an event coming up at the fairgrounds, I think, on the 25th.
And listen, I think her son is doing a fabulous job of creative things.
Yeah.
I just don't know how dynamic of a candidate that she is to capture folks' attention.
Well, and she does have a web page.
Yes.
And as little information as she has on Facebook about her positions, she has a very in-depth series of what she calls plans or whatever, on Facebook, covering public safety, workforce development, homelessness, so on and so forth. And they're bullet point. So there's not a lot of meat behind them, but I don't know that anybody's going to read too much more than 10 or 15 words.
But how do you get through it's hard to get through a primary if you don't have the debate or forum to discuss these issues, to reach your broader audience, to talk about these things. I know that on her Facebook page, as she launched her campaign, she would take different days to kind of talk about these initiatives. But I just don't know where the reach of that is.
And I agree. I believe she has that surface level talking points, which is more than most.
Yes.
Let's say this. I'll give it to her. She's more than most. But when I say she's going to have to get in the weeds, she's going to have to get in the detail for this race right now, because Brooke Grossman is running on goodwill. And I'm not just talking about public service. I'm sorry.
But who makes that connection?
Everybody makes that
I don't
connection.
think everybody makes that connection.
Well, you see, Jim, you know what you're telling me? You don't watch city council meetings.
That's probably true.
All right. So I think it's pretty easy to say that Brooke Grossman has become the candidate of City Hall. Couple of reasons. Number one, the young kids that were working on Councilwoman Martinez's campaign or working on Brooke Grossman's campaign. They're tied at the hip. The other thing is that the mayor has celebrated goodwill 3 or 4 times this year thus far. I also, earlier, I believe it was in January or early this year, Brooke Grossman came in asking for some of the federal funding around being able to provide housing for some of the homeless dealing with COVID issues. And this was at a time where the city was kind of having everyone at arm's length around this federal funding and what they were going to do with it. But Brooke was kind of brought in and paraded in regards to, wow, this is great. And she was given a headline right around the time that she was filing to run. So I think like city council has made it clear in regards to who their pony is.
And I'm saying this before her political, aspirations. Brooke Grossman was goodwill. When you thought about goodwill, you said Brooke Grossman, Ron Bowers, or David Schuster, right? They're the faces of the organization throughout the community. So when, whether it's intentional or not, when something happens, it's goodwill does something, you get tied to that benefit, So it's a bump that happens every time goodwill opens a new store. Every time Goodwill is in the community or Goodwill makes a statement about homelessness, and then you're the one to go there and collect the check, for the cameras. It again, it's great subliminal marketing that helps. So I don't think it's out there saying, she's pushing goodwill, but it's just a benefit to be part of a public entity.
Well,
It's a large part of her platform, her visual platform.
right. Well, and the reality is, and I'm not suggesting she's using the Goodwill connection, the fact that she's employed there to her benefit. I don't know what is in her heart or what is in her plans in terms of that. But I mean, Goodwill's been wildly successful in this community as a result of the efforts of many, probably including Brooke Grossman. From what I hear from people that have worked with her out there, they have nothing but great things to say about her.
But if Goodwill is wildly successful, what is that saying about our community?
Well, that's okay.
Because here's my issue. You can be fluent in the language of poverty, but a candidate needs to also be fluent in the language of prosperity.
I get that. And I'm not going to assign that one to Goodwill, because I think Goodwill's mission at its core is about moving people from poverty to prosperity and removing barriers. It's not about, I don't know whether it still says this or not, it's not about a handout, it's about a hand up. How do we get you from here to there? And I would think, from my perspective, and I'm not necessarily a huge Brooke Grossman fan, I don't dislike her. The only thing I have against Brooke Grossman is her Facebook post. She seems largely shocked about these issues that nobody that's been following the issues should be largely shocked about, because they've been this way for eons, right? But yeah, but other than that,
I wouldn't pin it on Goodwill either, right? That was just kind of point of name recognition that Goodwill gets it out there. As far as being shocked at those issues, I've sat down many times. Brooke Grossman is a very intelligent woman.
Oh, she
knows
is.
about those issues. That's alarming other people intentionally, right? That's like, oh my gosh, did you know? Like you're alarmed. You're not alarmed. You knew these issues exist. I hope, and you better had, especially in the work that you do. You should know about these issues. My biggest issue with both of these candidates right now is the line, right? How do you, if this is the only race that the Democrats win, are you going to be siloed? And if you're siloed, are you getting anything done? That's my concern.
Are you
right?
going to be siloed? Because we have a largely Democratic state. So, I mean, and we had, some will argue this point, but we had a Democratic delegate in that seat for many, many years. And professionally, I think many people would have called him successful at that.
But again, for him to be successful at that, he would have to be able to cross both lines. It's not just because you're in the party. It's about, are you able to go into rooms where the rooms aren't full of Democrats, right? Are you able to build the relationships
with your senator,
with the Republican leadership, right? Instead of pointing fingers at them as the Republicans are the reason that we're in the condition that we're in. Like, if it's a take a side kind of issue, I'm worried about it. Because whoever's in the seat is really going to have to be able to build and work those relationships from both sides of the aisle.
Have you seen a propensity in her to take a side other than her natural inclination, whatever that might be? Have you seen evidence that, because I haven't,
that she would take a side?
that she would take a side just to be, I think.
I said you can't do it.
No,
right?
okay, and I don't think she would, frankly. I think she's going to vote her conscience. And I think that in Washington County in particular, you know, there's not a lot of difference between Republican and Democrats. We're largely center. Some are center left, some are center right. I don't view her as a far left kind of person. Maybe you do. I've not seen that. She may be more left than I am.
And it's not with her voting record. And I'm not really more in the voting record. The voting part is, I'm not saying it's the easy part, it's the relationship part that's important. And the relationship you have to build here locally as well as downstate requires you to be open to both sides.
Right.
And that's it. And that's what I said a concern is. I'm not saying either one
I'll
can't
give you
do
an
it
example.
or won't do it, but it's going to be difficult if
Don
you're not in the
Munson.
rooms now.
Right.
Don
I'll
Munson.
give you an example. So, one of the things that I have learned from the delegate position, you're going to have a great relationship with the Black Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been one of the stumbling blocks of Delegate Cham. I looked at initiatives. None of the bills that she sponsored, I don't believe, and Dr. Cham can call me and correct me if I'm wrong, but none of them moved forward. On bond bill initiatives, the only thing that was assigned to the House in this legislative session was $18,000 for the Washington County Commission on Aging. From our understanding of how things worked around the state, she was kind of shut out by the Black Caucus because there was a fraction in her relationship. I have concerns about Brooke Grossman in regards to how she moves around our community, how she moves on certain issues, and I believe that can be a detriment in dealing with the Black Caucus down there because it's a different world. Your politics in Washington County and how you have to move once you get to Annapolis are two totally different beasts.
Yeah.
And I just think that there has to be some cleanup there.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's going to be difficult, period, to build these relationships.
Absolutely.
And I want to see relationships starting to be built now. I don't want you being elected and then trying to, because we just talked about some of the opposite that happened with Delegate Cham. Like if you're going to get into this seat, you need to be in these rooms right now, having these conversations right now, focus on economic development right now, because anyone and everyone can be. So I like to see some more of that.
Yeah. But again, this is the most vulnerable race, and I think
is.
this is where you're going to see all the energy. There was a dust up about abortion, and our good friend Andy Overton was kind of leading it on behalf of Brooke Grossman, and she was charging Delegate Cham with saying something on Facebook, and screenshots going back and forward. So that's obviously going to pick up once whomever wins on the Democratic side after the primary, that's going to pick up. So it'll be the most exciting race other than Republican on Republican crime in the county commissions, but we get to talk about that another time.
All right.
All right, well, stay right there. We'll have more in regards to 2022 election coverage after the break. Welcome back to the show. We're going to pick up our election 2022 coverage locally here. Next up, we have Board of Education. We have 6 candidates for that. We have Fred Chavis, we have Daryl Evans, Mike Gesford, Ethan Lowen, Linda Mary, and Anthony Williams. This school board is known as a nonpartisan election, gentlemen, but I don't believe that there's anything in politics, especially in our community, that is nonpartisan. Let's start with Mr. Fred Chavis. What say you, Jim?
Yeah, I had not intentionally, but I had lunch with Mr. Chavis. Actually, I had scheduled lunch with another person, and Mr. Chavis happened to come along, which was great. I enjoyed meeting him. He's a very personable guy. He didn't have a lot to say about. He was involved in the school board race at that point. Didn't have a lot to say about positions, but he was able to talk about some of the things that he'd like to see changed. I think he was previously worked for the Board of Education, as I understand it.
He was a teacher.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's not anymore. But I got to tell you, I don't know a lot about him other than the few interactions that that interaction and a few things that I've read on Facebook and otherwise.
Mr. Moore.
This is school board. Let me give my disclosure. I don't have any children in the school system, right? Yet, all right? So I don't primarily have any school, children in the school system.
Is that breaking news?
No, it's not breaking news. It'll get me in trouble. So, but I have worked with the school system very closely in my business dealings and through mediation and, even through the Chamber of Commerce and working in school. So I know that there's a great deal of opportunity right now in our schools, and just not here in Washington County. I'm talking about nationwide. We all see it. We all we're hearing about it, and I think it's greater than we even can imagine right now. And I'll defer to both of you who have children in the school system as well. There's a lot of leadership that's going to be needed. There's going to be a lot of huge decisions that are going to be made. I see Mr. Chavis, Fred Chavis, most of this stuff has been headline news, right? I just think a lot of that stuff could be a distraction, distracting from even what his true base of what his campaign could or should be, right? And I think that does a disservice to anybody. You don't hear about school board members or elected members in the paper all the time. Right, I really think the children need to be first, right?
But I don't know that I think that's a fair. I mean, we've had other board members that have made far more concerning headlines than Mr. Chavis, and
I disagree with those too.
Yeah, well, and in at least one case, it ended up in that school board member not being there anymore. That said, we have short memories. And,
you have short memories when you're a known commodity. When you're new to the community and, I know that Fred taught in the city, but coached track, football in the county. He's not very well known. This is a county race.
And This is just not an indictment on Fred Chavis. This is on anybody running for the school board, past, present, or future. The children need to be first, right? That's where that's what I want to see. Right. I want to see you talking about initiative, because it's so much you can be doing right now around the children before you get elected into position. And I met with a candidate for another seat last week, and that one thing I asked was, if you don't get elected, what are you going to do?
Right.
Right? Are you going to, if you're so passionate about this work and leadership and change, are you going to do it without the title?
Right.
And I want to see that in some of our candidates, especially now. Are you doing the work now, and will you continue to do the work and advocate for the work? And I think I'm more sensitive to this position because this is specifically around our youth who can't advocate for themselves in most cases.
Right. Here's what I'll say. I have 2 children in the school system, so obviously school board is of particular interest to me. I met Fred a few years ago, and I'll start off by saying this, and I know this may shock both of you. I think Fred would be an excellent school board member 10 years from now.
So your issue really is
10
one
years from
of
now.
maturity or knowing
It's maturity,
the
and
issues.
let me speak to that. When Fred did not become a part of the Democratic Central Committee, Kimberly Duff resigned her position, huge public dust-up.
Right.
When Fred did not meet his qualifications within the school system and lost his job, mass email out to the community, attributing it to everything else but personal responsibility, huge blow-up. When Fred was removed from service from the community center, huge community blow-up. There's a trend there.
Okay, but okay.
There's a trend of lack of accountability. Meaning, public campaigns were started on his behalf, dusting up all these issues, but there was no accountability.
But
for
if
him.
someone is coming to your defense, are you going to tell them no stop? I wouldn't.
If someone was coming to my offense when I didn't hold up my end of the bargain, I would be like, let's hold off on that. There's another way to address this.
But okay. Yeah.
So, for instance, if you didn't get your credentials correct to be able to keep your certifications as a teacher, how are you going to tell me that you're so passionate about the students and you're so passionate about minority representation and our teachers representing what our community is looking like and becoming? I think it is important, and this is why I say it's maturity. You have to keep the main thing the main thing. And I'll equate it to something that my first mentor told me when I became a financial advisor. He says, Reggie, my first piece of advice for you is the best way that you can help poor people is not to become one. The best way that you can help black and brown students is to retain your position to be able to educate them. And it was to no fault of his own that did not happen. But his communication and his public plea was blaming everyone else, but not taking accountability that he let the kids down.
And you're saying that in your mind is a maturity issue, and that over time that'll probably resolve.
It should resolve. I think maturing. I think understanding that running for school is not about politics and the way he tried to align himself politically with certain people. I think that this campaign is going to teach him that people that align themselves with you, especially black candidates in this day and age, will fall away from you quickly when your star is not rising at the rate that they projected it to be.
Okay.
And I can speak specifically about Mr. Chavis' relationship to children. The man loves the youth. The man has a great relationship with them.
And the whole, as soon as you said coach, because you know what, that's not a job, that's a thankless job.
Well, he was a track coach at Williamsport,
Yes.
so he probably coached. He might have coached the boys, but your daughters are part of the track team.
So that's my thing is, I think that's where his focus is. That's what you show. Stay out of the politics,
Right.
because that's where people judge you. And if I don't know you, and this is a county position, so if I don't know you, what's the first thing I do to find out about you? I Google you. And when I Google you,
Everything I said is public
you
information.
get headlines. And
Okay.
people make poor decisions off of
Well,
headlines.
okay, and that's right. Okay, so I'll buy that. But those headlines are still theoretically. So you're saying he needs more positive press. You're saying he needs more maturity.
He
and
needs a
then-
resume of accomplishment.
Okay, but let me just remind you, and there are entrepreneurs all at this table, right, in some form or another. One fact of entrepreneurship is you're going to fail.
Absolutely.
I have failed many times,
Yes.
and I've never run for election, nor will I ever run for election.
Right.
Is
but-
that breaking news?
That is not breaking news. But I don't necessarily. He's not broken any laws that I know of. He's not. Okay. I hear you.
And again,
I'm not 100% on board. I think the point that should stick out is the point you just made. He's about the kids.
And that's what I'm trying to get to. So drive that home. You got it. Like you said, if as an entrepreneur, when you fail, you know you have to succeed to put that failure behind you. Lean in on your strengths.
Yeah. But I'm agreeing with you, because I can tell you, as I matured as an entrepreneur, the first time that I failed as an entrepreneur, you know who I blamed it on? Everybody but me.
Right.
All right, and when you're in politics as an entrepreneur, you and your reputation are your product. You don't have anything else to sell. Yeah. So you gotta handle that, and you gotta nurture that. And I think he does a lot of great work with the kids, with the youth. I know recently he was at a book signing. He's written books to support the community. He has a strong resume of stuff over here that is getting overshadowed by headlines. And that's all I'm saying. He needs to really work on that PR, and that may come with maturity as well. And I hope so, because I believe he has a true passion that our school and our kids can benefit from.
Now, I will tell you that my former partner in the flip side, one of his famous sayings, and there were many, was, "There's no such bad thing as bad press, only press."
So I think in Washington County it's a little different.
Okay.
Especially in a school board election, and how partisan it's becoming with books and not books in the library and all of that discussion. I just think it moves a little different. But again, I will stick by what I said. In the next 10 years, I think he will be a great candidate.
All right.
I think beyond that, he could be very well interviewing in 15, 20 years for a superintendent position. Like, he is that talented of a young man. But there's some cleanup there.
And also, just kind of as his caveat, with that whole trigger of critical race theory being out there as well.
Right.
Also, he was very big on advocating for Black Lives Matter. He is the president of the NAACP. So also there is that assumption and that fear that because people are triggered by CRT for some crazy reason. But these are things you have to combat politically. And that's where you need to put your focus at. And that's what, and I think, and we're going into some of the other candidates as well. And I know we have Anthony Williams, who is the entrepreneur, speaking of entrepreneur, and has done
Beacon House,
done work with the Beacon House as well. And looking at his page, he lists a lot of his credentials as far as education background, homegrown here in the community. But again, has been very quiet for this school board election, from what I'm seeing, of course. So if you've seen more, let me know. He has been somewhat quiet here, but no, he has been more vocal about himself and his business in years past. So probably would like to hear a little bit more. Again, this is a very sensitive election, you know, especially to those who really know that the youth have such great needs right now.
But with Anthony, it's kind of the opposite, right? His educational resume is a little bit more robust, right?
Well, he's about done a doctoral program,
Right.
isn't it? He's got to finish his dissertation or something.
But then on the other side, it's the, you know, for me, what's the appeal going to be to his candidacy in the county? You know, and, you know, going back to Chavis, the other thing for him, he's running a grassroots campaign with not a lot of funding. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be hard for him to get his message out. Williams
runs a nonprofit, so his nonprofit kind of speaks for him, right? You know, the kind of same way we talked about with Goodwill, the business kind of speaks for him. The difference is it's his, though. It's his nonprofit. It was his baby that he birthed. Right.
In regards to that, I did watch the candidate forum that they had a month or so ago that HCC held. I believe he equipped himself well. I think he could speak towards the budgets and numbers, and I think being able to speak to the budgets is something that's important as well. I just don't know. What say you, Jim?
Yeah, I think he's interesting. He's been on the show before. It's been a while, but he's an interesting candidate. He's obviously very smart. I don't know enough about his positions, and even looking at his webpage, I see his biography.
His page is light.
Yeah, it's very light on positions. What is he going to do? What big things does he think needs to continue, change, be removed from our school system.
Yeah, I look at his page and it looks like he's running for a public school administrative position versus a school board election.
Exactly.
He does have a robust resume around education. He has a business that has been focused around STEM, in the community. He has ties to the business community because he working through the chamber a lot as well. But all that doesn't build a resume for school board policy and decisions that need to be made. It more so looks like he'd be a great administrator.
I mean, it's like he's running off of his resume, right? There's nothing, you look at his page, there's nothing speaking to the issues that our kids are facing right now. He may have spoke about that in that forum, but that forum was limited in regards to viewership.
Right.
So I just don't know how they're going to get the message out. Now, the advantage to all of these candidates, I believe they all will get through.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there is time for them to build up and ramp up their campaigns and getting their message out. And I'm sure there's going to be some forums, future forum. I would imagine there's going to be future forums around this race to hear more from these candidates.
And let me pose this to both of you. How do you think the school board is doing right now? As we see, there's 3 that actually sit currently that are going to be remaining. What is the performance of the school board as a whole? How would you grade it?
Let's wait till we pick the superintendent.
Well, I think that okay. I'm going to weigh in here. I think that we've seen a lot of success from our school system. I mean, are there things that can be improved? Yeah. Show me one thing in life that can't be improved. It doesn't exist. So I'm not gonna hang the school board for just because there are things that they probably would like to do better, and we may like to see them do better. I think that our current superintendent, or June 30, has done an amazing job. I think that the school board is far more functional with him in the leadership position than they were with his predecessor. And I think, frankly, that we've gotten more done. And I think there has been a focus on the students, generally, which I think all of us at this table have suggested is a good thing.
Okay. Any fallout from COVID and decisions made by the school board that you think is going to come to this election?
No. I think they made the best decisions they could at the time. Some that were out of their control. No, I don't think that's going to. I mean, is there fallout from COVID? Yes. Students had a tough time with COVID in the school system. Do I blame that on the school system? No. We were all charting new waters, right?
All right.
We've never been there before. And the good news for Washington County is we were already a 1-to-1 ratio of technology to students. So I would argue that we probably were able to accommodate more quickly than others.
Yeah. So the other, and we're starting obviously with the candidates that are not incumbents. Now the other candidate that's new to the process, it looks like, is Ethan Lowen.
Right.
Ethan was a part of the HCC forum as well. I would just say the thing that stood out to me immediately from just watching a few minutes of that forum is he is extremely partisan.
Yes, he is.
Mm-hmm. He came out, like, one of his big issues was the library books. And so that tells me, this whole library book situation became a national issue that's kind of trickled down to school boards across the nation. And maybe that's why we have a shortage of, I believe, about 180 superintendents around the nation. So my concern is it's a nonpartisan election, but he comes off as very partisan. So that was something that just that turned me off right away.
I love the school books comment, because I've heard 3 times at 3 different occasions where you should vote for X because they won't remove books out of our schools.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the decision. That's what the swing vote, the topic is right now, is how are you going to address removing those books from the schools? Are you for or you're against? And that's how people are going to vote. So that's going to be the voting issue versus the candidate. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Jim.
I don't have much more to add to that one.
Yeah. I mean, that was what I saw, and
yeah,
that was enough. Now, the 3 that are or incumbents that are running for re-election is Daryl Evans, Linda Mary,
No, yeah,
right?
yeah,
And Mike
yeah,
Gessler.
that's correct.
right? So it's a tough race, right? You're running for 3 spots. You have 3 known commodities against 3 unknowns. And obviously, after the firing of a school board member, things kind of calmed down in that building, right? No major issues that came out of there. Jim, I'll come to you in regards to the 3 incumbents. And
So I had questions about at least one of those in past election cycles. I don't have those questions anymore. I think that, number one, I think particularly Linda Murray, I am a huge fan. I think she's done amazing work. Mike Gessler.
she was at the forum as well, and she sounded reasonable.
Well, she's not only reasonable, she's very articulate, and she is very informed on the issues that are facing our students.
Let's check Jim down for 1 vote for Linda.
You know, Mike Gessford, I've known Mike my entire life almost. He and I went to school together. He was a couple years younger than me.
And Mike has had some dust-ups in previous cycles.
Mike has had some dust-ups. He has, for sure. And there was some. I had some questions. I think Mike's done a pretty good job here this last term, and even you know, prior to that. I was not dissuaded by the dust-ups, and I think that paid off. And Mr. Evans, frankly, I don't know enough about. I know
Right.
he was
appointed,
yes,
correct?
he was. He was appointed, and again, what I've seen, I liked. I don't have a lot of. I can't speak with authority on Mr. Evans at this point.
All right, we got Jim's 3 votes down.
And again, with this is you're voting on the body. That's why I asked the question as the body of the board. You know, individually, it's hard to separate standouts unless they really go rogue against a
Right,
decision.
unless there's a big issue where there's
Right. So you got to judge on the work of the body over the last,
Right.
and especially with 3 coming up right now. If you believe the body did a great job or was strong, it's going to be hard to win.
Gotcha. Yeah, other than the dust up where the Board of Ed member was removed, again, I think that they handled COVID to the best of their ability in those challenges. I just think it's incumbent that the school board, the county commissioners, and the teachers need to find this working relationship to address the challenges with the new superintendent that we're seeing in some of these schools and with our children and the effects of COVID. You know, some kids that have not returned back to the school system, some of the learning challenges that we're seeing, some of the behavioral situations that we're seeing, especially in some of the schools in the city. I just think that it's a challenge. So
Yep.
I think it's going to be tough for the 3 outsiders to kind of get in regards to this one, especially
may
if
be
they
right.
have limited resources.
You may be right.
working for that. So, gentlemen, we were long-winded as we usually are, but we'll have to hold it here until next week. We hope that you will join us next week for another episode of The Flip Side to continue to discuss the 2022 election.